another low volume day, Carol Massar here, about 27% below where we would normally be in terms of volume. And the net effect of it all is an S&P that's relatively unchanged.
Yeah, it feels kind of anemic, right, in terms of the trade. Really, really kind of mellow. But we are off our best levels of the session. However, take a look at the big banks. Thank you, Bank of America and Citi, because you've got the KBW Bank Index up about 1.2%. So some outperformance certainly in that group.
Not a lot of conviction in today's trade, at least according to the S&P 500. We did see it move between gains and losses just a little fewer than a dozen times today, but really hovering at that unchanged portion for some of the day around 1 o'clock.
It definitely feels like everyone's waiting for another shoe to drop, but they need to wait a few more weeks before it does, certainly until the end of this week, because there's not a whole lot going on, right? You have Jay Powell speaking, and so maybe people are holding off until then.
Good point.
And you also have a holiday shortened week and, waiting for more people to come in, waiting for more earnings to come in for companies to say that they have no visibility.
I do wonder if the shoe that is going to drop, Scarlet, is it domestically produced or would that shoe be imported?
And we talk about earnings too. We are going to get some earnings after the bell, including out of United Airlines, J.B. Hunt, the big trucking company, as well as Omnicom, of course, a big advertising agency. So we'll get a little bit of a cross section here of economic conditions. Just want to point out too, headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal, a huge drop today in the Swiss franc. Remember, that had been a huge part of a lot of that disruptive trade that we saw last week when it came to the dollar, as well as treasuries here, a 1% drop on the Swiss franc relative to the dollar on the day. Meanwhile, the majority of the S&P stocks are in the red, but the net effect of it relatively unchanged. A loss of about 9 points or 0.2% on the benchmark index. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 156 points or 0.4%. The NASDAQ unchanged on the day, and Scarlet, the Russell 2000 coming in on the day here with a drop of roughly about I take that back. A gain of about 0.1%.
Okay, so pretty muted moves there for the major indexes. Let's get you some earnings that just crossed. United Airlines reporting first quarter adjusted EPS of 91 cents, beating the consensus estimate of 74 cents. United also sees its second quarter adjusted EPS of $3.25 to $4.25. So that's a $1 band. Analysts were looking for somewhere in the neighborhood of $3.97. So it's a little bit all over the place when it comes to second quarter adjusted EPS. For the full year, it has maintained its forecast. It still sees anywhere from $11.50 to $13.50 if bookings are stable. And of course, that's a big if because we don't know what the situation is when it comes to tariffs and uncertainty. And as a result, United provides two full-year adjusted EPS scenarios amid all this uncertainty.
Can I just say United provides two fiscal year adjusted EPS scenarios and uncertainty? I can't even remember the last time I've really seen a company do that, but I know.
I mean, it's at least they provided something though here, so maybe that gives investors something to hang their hats on.
Amazing.
Meanwhile, Interactive Brokers reporting results as they crosses the wire right now. The company's first quarter adjusted net revenue coming in line with estimates at about $1.4 billion. Net interest income a slight miss at $770 million. The street was looking for roughly $794 million. The company also saying that its total customer accounts did tick up just ever so slightly. 3.62 million. Street was looking for 3.61. We're going to dive a little bit deeper and see if there's any forecast. Not jumping out at the moment. Shares unchanged in the after-hour session.
Okay, let's go back to United Airlines. Shares higher by about 2.4% in the after hours. As Carol mentioned, the company did provide two fiscal year adjusted EPS scenarios amid uncertainty. The company sees second quarter adjusted EPS $3.25 to $4.25. The estimate was for $3.97. United still sees fiscal year adjusted EPS $11.50 to $13.50 if bookings remain stable. Sees fiscal year adjusted EPS in recessionary scenario $7 to $9. So a big cut if there were a recession. Again, United coming out with two different fiscal year adjusted EPS scenarios amid uncertainty.
All right, guys.
But just to that point, though, too, because I'm trying to remember the last time I saw a major company give that type of range. I mean, this is kind of what analysts do on Wall Street. They kind of give the bull case and the bear case. But it gets to this idea. We've had a few CEOs on this program and CFOs talking about this idea. They were reticent to give guidance primarily because, A, they didn't want to get sued, but also just this idea of how do you even know?
So what do? You hedge your bets and say, listen, if this happens, here's what could happen for us. And if this happens, here's what else could happen. I mean, I can't remember last time I've ever kind of seen that from a company. So pretty interesting.
It feels like investors like it, though, given that the stock is higher in after-hours trading. And it's a little more honest than to say we have no visibility, we don't know, we're going to keep our guidance, but it'll exclude the impact of tariffs. They're saying, here's how we're thinking through everything.
And I will say that they are pulling in their fiscal year adjusted CapEx below $6.5 billion. They had seen up to $7 billion. The street estimate was $6.7 billion. So this again speaks to maybe pulling in a little bit in terms of their spending.
I briefly want to jump in with Omnicom, the advertising, marketing, communications company. Shares in the after hours are unchanged. The company did report first quarter revenue that came in pretty much in line with estimates at $3.69 billion. First quarter adjusted earnings per share coming in above estimates at $1.70.
And I'm kind of curious, too. I mean, obviously, Omnicom itself, of course, isn't necessarily a barn burner of a stock, but don't forget we get Netflix in a couple of days, and it'll be interesting. And, of course, with that new ad tier, it'll be interesting to see how they fare during the time, and particularly going forward with, if they do offer guidance, going forward, sort of what that ad tier actually looks like, particularly if you do think that we are headed towards some sort of economic softness.
I wonder if United, by giving two scenarios, gives permission for everyone else to therefore give different scenarios in their earnings outlook as well. You open the floodgates and now everyone can say, okay, here's what it looks like if things go on as normal. Here's what it looks like if we dip into recession.
Because it was big news last week when Delta essentially pulled its guidance and said there was too much uncertainty. We can't tell you what we think we're going to do because we have no idea. Do then other companies come back and say, okay, wait a second, we can provide these two different scenarios. Here's what we're thinking if there's a recession or if there's a slowdown. And here's what we're thinking if things go undisturbed.
I agree with you, though, Scarlett. Investors giving them props. I mean, you got United Airlines up about 4.8% here in the after hours. So maybe investors saying thanks for giving us and laying it out for us. American Airlines, folks, I just want to point out, also up about 1.6%. Delta's up about 2.4%. JetBlue up about 0.8%. So we're seeing the whole group being lifted. I know you've got some earnings there, Romaine.
Yeah, J.B. Hunt, the trucking company, out with its first quarter EPS numbers, $1.17. That's what's coming in. That beats street estimates. On average, they were looking for $1.15. Revenue, $2.92 billion, a slight beat as well over the average of analyst estimates. And the company saying that its dedicated revenue at $822 million. That's actually a little bit of a slight miss. Nevertheless, the shares up by about 1.4% here in the after hours trade. And the big question I have going into that conference call isn't so much about guidance, but this idea here as whether this company is in the moment a beneficiary here of some of that pull forward that we seem to be talking about anecdotally with regards to consumers trying to get their hands on everything they can before the tariffs kick in.
And how long does that pull forward last? We saw that certainly at the end of the first quarter, and we're definitely seeing it at the start of the second quarter. But now that you have this 90-day reprieve on most of the tariffs, does that continue until we get a final word on the tariffs?
Hey, I'm just going through United's statement to try to get more color and clarity on these two different outlooks. The company did say this is a challenging macroeconomic environment. They also said they're removing 4 percentage points of scheduled domestic capacity in response to the current demand environment. They're going to do that starting in the third quarter of 2025. They're also saying they're going to make prudent adjustments to the utilization rate of its fleets, including ongoing reductions of off-peak flying on lower demand days. They expect to continue this approach into the fourth quarter of 2025, and they're going to retire 21 aircraft earlier than previously planned. That part they had announced previously.
Listen, we said that these earnings were all going to be important. We're just getting going. But I mean, they're laying it out. They're kind of to saying that, yeah, there's uncertainty, but here's how it could go if we see kind of a change, maybe when it comes to tariffs in the economic environment. Good news versus maybe not so good news. I mean, I'm looking at United, mind you, they've been hammered this year, like a lot of the airlines. It's still up about 4.5%. I feel like the earnings analyst call is going to be really crucial because I feel like analysts are going to push them, even further. Like, which scenario is more likely, the bad one or the better one?
Yeah, but then that sort of requires them to be kind of like, economic, strategists, macro strategists, if you will. I'm sure it's something that they'd rather avoid doing. But it gets to this idea, too, as to who is now making that call, right? Because this really goes beyond the purview of what the normal job duties would be of your CFO and certainly of the CEO, him or herself. So the question is, who do they have on staff there who is kind of the economic whisperer, if you will?
Yeah, it's a good point. Also a good point is the idea that they're giving two scenarios, but there could be any number of scenarios. There could be countless scenarios, but at least by giving two extreme scenarios, it kind of resets expectations in terms of it could be anywhere from here to here, and we'll just see how it goes. Worth noting as well that Delta and American Airlines shares are following United higher in after-hours trade.
I was just on a United plane.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
How was the meal?
I made it back.
How was the meal? Shake Shack burger?
No, there were no Shake Shack.
Oh, you were in the back of the plane, right?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Did you get peanuts and a pillow at least? Only kidding.
Twisting that knife a little bit there.
I see how he flies. He's in the front of the plane. All right, that's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage. Earnings just getting started, folks. But we're going to wrap it up on this Tuesday on radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. Be sure to catch us same time, same place tomorrow.